No one could have imagined what would happen at that fancy club in Northlake Hills. It was a place where appearances came first, and rules mattered more than people. When an arrogant woman crossed every line with my son, a sweet, disabled boy, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I was willing to let it all slide, until the moment she threw him into the water as if he were trash, and then everything changed. Northlake Hills was the kind of place that screamed perfection at every corner, streets so clean you could eat off the asphalt, lawns trimmed with a ruler, and houses that seemed to pose for an eternal home decor magazine shoot. The neighbors, always flashing wide smiles, the kind that never reached their eyes. Me, Dean Walker, I landed here by chance with my son Noah, a 10-year-old boy who lights up any room with his laugh, even though he's been in a wheelchair since. He was 5. I didn't tell anyone I'm the county sheriff. Not out of shame, but out of exhaustion. After my wife, Claire, passed, all I wanted was a corner where Noah could grow up without the weight of the world on his shoulders. A place where he could just be a kid, not a story of triumph. Noah had his own ways of making Northlake Hills less artificial. He'd spend hours on the porch with binoculars I inherited from my dad, pointing at the birds crossing the sky. "Look, Dad, that's a red cardinal. Did you know they stay with the same partner forever?" He spoke with such enthusiasm that I almost forgot the sleepless nights. When he wasn't bird-watching, Noah drew. Not just childish scribbles, he created entire worlds, with flying cities and forests where the trees sang. I kept every drawing like it was a piece of him, because deep down I knew time spares no one, not even the best of us. But Northlake Hills wasn't the paradise it promised. In the first few days, I noticed the looks. Not the pitying ones because of Noah's wheelchair. Those I already knew by heart. These were furtive glances, as if people knew something I hadn't yet figured out. A conversation cut short when I walked by, a gate locked with a brand new padlock. Small cracks in the perfect facade. And then, one Saturday morning, while Noah was trying to convince a sparrow to land in our yard, I heard the name that seemed to loom like a shadow over the community. Meredith Blake. She was the president of the Homeowners Association, the E. Kind of woman who ruled with a sharp smile and a notebook that seemed to hold the life of every resident. Meredith showed up at our door on the 3rd day, carrying a welcome cake so perfect it looked fake, like everything else around here. "Dean, Noah, welcome. Northlake Hills is a family. Here, we take care of each other." Her voice was syrupy, but there was something in her eyes, a coldness that made me grip Noah's hand a little tighter. She asked about our lives, about Claire, about Noah's wheelchair, with a curiosity that didn't seem innocent. I gave her the bare minimum, keeping my metaphorical badge well hidden. But when she left, Noah looked at me with those eyes that see beyond the obvious and said, "Dad, she doesn't like birds. I don't trust people who don't like birds." Meredith Blake wasn't just the HOA president. She was the uncrowned Queen of Northlake Hills, ruling with the precision of someone who thinks the world revolves around their navel. She carried a leather-bound notebook like it was the Bible, jotting down every detail out of place. A blue trash bin at the Johnsons instead of grey, a bike left on the Carter's lawn, a flower pot with the wrong shade on the Nguyen's porch. Fines arrived in the mail with her signature in letters so perfect they looked printed. She was the kind of person who made you feel judged for breathing out of rhythm. I knew she'd be trouble from the first meeting, but it was in the second week that Meredith showed her claws. I'd spent the weekend building a ramp for Noah in the front yard. Nothing fancy, just solid wood and a gentle slope so he could come and go without needing me all the time. Noah was thrilled, testing the ramp with his wheelchair like it was a racetrack, laughing loudly as he shouted, "Dad, now I'm the Flash." I smiled, but the moment didn't last. On Monday, Meredith showed up. She rang the doorbell at 7 in the morning, as if trying to catch us off guard. She was impeccable. Beige suit, blonde hair in a bun that defied gravity, and that smile that seemed polite, but smelled like a threat. "Dean," she began, not even glancing at Noah, who was playing with a toy car on the porch, "that structure in your yard, we've had complaints. It violates the street's aesthetic harmony." Aesthetic harmony. The words came out of her mouth like they were universal law. My blood boiled, but I stayed calm. Years as a sheriff taught me that losing your cool is just handing ammunition to the enemy. "My son needs this, Meredith," I replied, pointing to Noah, who was now watching us with that curious look he got when he sensed something was wrong. "It's not decoration. It's necessity." She narrowed her eyes, as if I'd insulted her very existence. "I understand, but we have rules. Everyone here sacrifices a little for the common good. Perhaps you could reconsider the aesthetics." She handed me a pamphlet with the association's architectural guidelines, as if I were a naughty student in need of a lesson. "I'll send a formal notice. We have deadlines, Dean." When she turned away, her heels clicking on the concrete like a clock ticking down, Noah rolled closer. "She doesn't like my ramp, does she, Dad?" His voice was soft, not sad, but with that sting of someone starting to realize the world isn't always fair. "It's not the ramp she has a problem with, son," I said, ruffling his hair. "It's anything she can't control." The days that followed in Northlake Hills were like walking on hot coals. Every morning brought a new warning in the mailbox, each stamped with the HOA seal and Meredith Blake's signature, so flawless, it seemed to mock me. The first was for unauthorized facade alteration, Noah's ramp, of course. The second, even more absurd, was for visible therapeutic items on the porch. Noah loved spending afternoons in the yard, lying on the colorful mat his speech therapist recommended, playing with his hands while the sun warmed his face. He'd laugh, point at the clouds, and make up stories about dragons flying among them. To Meredith, that was household clutter. Clutter. The word burned in my mind like a personal insult. I tried to stay calm, tearing up the notices before Noah could see them. But kids notice everything, even when you think you're hiding it well. One afternoon, while he was drawing on the mat, "A castle with wheels, so I can live in it, Dad," Noah stopped suddenly and looked at me with those eyes that held more questions than answers. "Dad, why don't people here like me?" His voice was so small it felt like the whole world paused to listen. My chest tightened, like someone had driven a knife into it. I swallowed hard, knelt beside him and held his hands. "You're perfect just the way you are, my champ. Anyone who doesn't see that is the one who's wrong." He gave a crooked little smile, the kind that tries to believe, but I saw the shadow of insecurity growing in his eyes. It broke my heart into pieces so small I didn't know how to put them back together. That night, after Noah fell asleep clutching a drawing of a dragon, I sat on the porch with a cup of cold coffee and a rage that didn't fit inside me. It wasn't just about the ramp or the mat. It was about my son being reduced to a violation on a piece of paper, about a place that promised to be a home but seemed determined to erase who Noah was. Meredith might think she was in charge, but I wasn't. The kind of man who backed down. For Noah, I'd face anything, even the queen of Northlake Hills and whatever she was hiding behind her fines and fake smiles. But as I looked out at the silent street, with its white fences gleaming under the moonlight, one thing was clear. This fight was just beginning, and I'd have to play as dirty as she did. Northlake Hills was starting to feel like a cage disguised as paradise. The neighborhood kids who used to run across the lawn with Noah, laughing as he told stories about birds turning into superheroes, disappeared. It wasn't sudden, it was gradual, like someone had whispered a warning I didn't hear. First, little Lily, who lived in the yellow house, stopped showing up with her soccer ball. Then Timmy, who loved asking Noah for drawing tips, started saying his mum wouldn't let him come out. Even the noisy group that played tag in the street began avoiding our yard. Noah noticed. Of course he noticed. He didn't say anything, but I saw it in his eyes, that spark dimming a little more each day that passed without an "Hey, Noah," from a window. The culprit had a name, Meredith Blake. She patrolled the streets of Northlake Hills like she owned every square inch, that leather notebook in hand, and a look that made the air feel heavy. It wasn't just surveillance, it was intimidation. I saw her scold a girl for dropping ice cream on the sidewalk, her tone so sharp the kid swallowed her tears on the spot. Another day, I caught Meredith standing on a corner, staring down a group of boys laughing too loudly until they fell silent and scattered. It was like she wanted to erase any trace of life that didn't fit her rules. Even the sound of laughter seemed to offend her. The neighbors, who had greeted us at first with shy waves and baskets of muffins, started pulling away. Mr. Carter, who'd left that kind note on our door, now only mumbled a rushed "good morning." glancing around like he was afraid of being caught. Mrs. Nguyen, who once invited Noah to see her garden flowers, began closing her curtains when she saw us. On the porch, it was suffocating. Meredith's shadow stretched over Northlake Hills like a heavy cloud, the kind that promises a storm, but never lets the rain fall. I could feel the community shrinking around us, as if the white fences were closing in, inch by inch. Deep down, I still thought I could handle it. I'm a sheriff, after all. I've faced drug dealers, shootouts, sleepless nights tracking leads. I figured Meredith was just a neighborhood tyrant, someone I could ignore if I stayed calm, followed her stupid rules, and shielded Noah from the worst. Just gotta tough it out, I kept telling myself, helping Noah adjust his chair on the ramp, pretending the silence from the other yards didn't bother me. I told him to keep drawing, to keep dreaming of his flying birds, as if my strength could protect him from everything. But I was wrong. So wrong it hurt to realize. The Saturday of the Northlake Hills Club party was the kind of day that seemed designed to deceive. The sun shone bright, reflecting off the crystal-clear pool water as if the world were pure joy. Families spread out across the common area, colorful towels stretched on the grass, kids shouting and diving, the smell of barbecue floating in the air. It was the first big event since we arrived, and Noah was electric. He hadn't stopped talking about the pool since breakfast. "Dad, do you think there are birds that swim around here, like ducks in disguise?" He laughed, flapping his arms as if he could fly there. Noah couldn't swim. His wheelchair and muscle weakness made it impossible, but just being near the water, watching the other kids jump and splash, made him glow. I pushed his chair to a shaded spot by the pool where he could see everything, and I sat beside him, one eye on him, the other on the world. As a sheriff, staying alert was second nature. As a father, it was my armor. For a while, it was almost perfect. Noah clapped every time someone did a funny jump, laughing loud enough to draw smiles from some moms, smiles mixed with that familiar blend of tenderness and pity I already knew too well. I pretended not to notice. He pointed at the colorful balloons tied to chairs, making up stories about aquatic spaceships. I smiled, but my senses stayed sharp, catching every detail. Mr. Carter sipping lemonade alone in a corner, Mrs. Nguyen avoiding my gaze, and the kids' laughter that even here seemed to keep its distance from Noah. Northlake Hills never let you forget there was something rotten beneath the surface. Then she appeared. Meredith Blake crossed the lawn like she owned the sun and the shade. She wore an absurdly wide-brimmed hat that seemed to defy gravity and oversized sunglasses big enough to hide any trace of humanity in her eyes. Her impeccable suit, even on a pool day, screamed control. She greeted people with that rehearsed smile, but every step felt calculated, like she was patrolling a war zone. When her gaze landed on us, a chill ran down my spine. Noah, oblivious, kept laughing at a boy who attempted a flip and belly flopped into the water. Meredith stopped a few feet away, frowned, and muttered something to the skinny man beside her, a guy I didn't recognize, holding a clipboard. Her words hit me like a knife. "That chair is ruining the common area." My blood boiled. It was another one of her critiques, another attempt to reduce my son to an inconvenience. I stood up, ready to respond with the composure that was already hanging by a thread, but before I could open my mouth, everything fell apart. A scream sliced through the air. Not playful, but pure panic. Meredith reached out and shoved Noah's wheelchair with a force that didn't match her neighborhood queen facade. The movement was so deliberate, so cold, it felt rehearsed. Noah's scream tore through the air, a sound I'd never heard from him. Raw panic, like the entire world had betrayed him. The chair wobbled, hit the pool's edge, and tipped over. My son fell into the water with a dull thud, his arms flailing as he sank. Noah couldn't swim. His body, so strong in dreams and so fragile in life, wouldn't obey. The people around us froze, mouths agape like statues in a nightmare. I saw Mr. Carter drop his drink, Mrs. Nguyen cover her mouth, but no one moved. Meredith stood there still, her sunglasses reflecting the chaos like she was watching a performance. I dove in, without thinking. The world went silent. a void where only the muffled sound of water and the desperation to reach my son existed. The pool, which minutes ago had looked like a summer mirror, was now a murky abyss pulling Noah down. He was just a few feet away, his eyes wide with terror, bubbles escaping his mouth as he tried to fight something he couldn't beat. I grabbed his arm, pulled with every ounce of strength I had, and swam upward, my chest burning, my heart screaming louder than anything. When I broke the surface, holding Noah against me, he was coughing and trembling, but alive. Alive. The world felt like slow motion as I held Noah to my chest, water streaming off us, as if it could wash away the panic still pulsing through him. His wide, terrified eyes searched mine, and his frail arms, which moments before had pointed at balloons with joy, now trembled, clutching my shirt. I felt his heart racing against mine, a desperate drumbeat saying he was alive but hurt in an eye way no water could cleanse. As we emerged from the pool, the hot air of the party hit like a slap, bringing back sound, or the lack of it. The crowd was petrified. Some mums covered their mouths, tears streaming silently. Others, to my fury, held up phones, filming like my son's life was a spectacle. Mr. Carter, in the corner, knocked over the chair he'd been sitting in, his face pale. Mrs. Nguyen was murmuring something, maybe a prayer, but no one moved to help, and there she was. Meredith Blake, at the center of it all, arms crossed like the chaos was just an inconvenience. Her oversized hat shaded half her face, but her sunglasses didn't hide the sneer on her lips. "He's fine," she said, her tone dripping with disdain, rolling her eyes like Noah was a kid throwing a tantrum, not a boy who'd nearly drowned because of her. Those words ignited something in me, a rage so raw it felt like it was tearing through my skin. This wasn't about the ramp, the fines, or Northlake Hills' stupid rules anymore. It was about dignity, about my son's life being treated like garbage by someone who thought she could rule the world. I gently laid Noah on the grass, wrapping him in a towel someone finally had the decency to bring. "It's okay, champ. I'm here," I whispered, even though okay was a lie he didn't deserve to hear. He coughed, still trembling, but gripped my hand tightly, as if trying to anchor me as much as I wanted to protect him. Then I stood, water dripping from me, my shirt clinging to my body, and walked straight toward Meredith. The crowd parted, the silence so heavy you could hear the hum of insects. She didn't back down, but I saw her fingers tighten on her crossed arms, a sign that beneath her facade, something was shaking. I stopped a step away, close enough to smell the expensive perfume that couldn't mask her venom. Without a word, I lifted my soaked shirt, letting the sheriff's badge clipped to my belt gleam in the sunlight. The metal flashed, reflecting her face for a second, and I saw what I wanted. Meredith paled, her fake smile crumbled, her sunglasses failing to hide the flicker of panic in her eyes. She opened her mouth, maybe to spit out an excuse or another, rule from her notebook, but nothing came out. For the first time, the Queen of Northlake Hills looked small. Water still dripped from my shirt, pooling at my feet, but I didn't feel the cold. All I felt was Noah, wrapped in a towel, his breathing steadying against my shoulder, and the rage burning inside me like a flame that wouldn't die. Meredith Blake stood a few steps away, arms crossed in a pathetic attempt to seem untouchable, but the sun hitting the badge on my belt told a different story. The crowd around us was still holding its breath, torn between shock and guilt, but I had no time for them. My focus was her. "You just committed assault against a disabled child," I said, my voice steady, each word slicing the air like a blade. "And you did it in front of dozens of witnesses." I made a point to gesture at the people around us, phones still raised, tears drying on faces, eyes that finally seemed to wake up. Meredith blinked rapidly, her veneer of superiority cracking. "It was a misunderstanding," she shot back, her voice louder than normal, as if volume could erase what everyone had seen. The chair was in the way, I didn't mean—" She stopped, realizing each word was burying her deeper. The crowd wasn't buying it. A murmur grew, like a wave gathering strength. Mrs. Nguyen, who always looked away, stepped forward, her voice trembling with anger. "You went too far, Meredith." Mr. Carter, still pale, shouted, "He's a child, for God's sake." Other voices joined in, a chorus of outrage echoing through the club. "You always do this. Enough of controlling everyone." It was as if Northlake Hills' spell had broken and the untouchable queen stood naked before her kingdom. Someone in the back, maybe the kid serving lemonade, yelled, "Dean's the sheriff." The phrase caught on, spreading like wildfire. Whispers turned to shouts, and shouts turned to applause, a wave of support I hadn't expected, but that gave me the strength to see this through. Meredith took a step back, her oversized hat wobbling as if it might fall. Her sunglasses slipped down her nose, revealing her eyes, and there for the first time I saw fear, not just fear of being caught. Something deeper, like she knew the ground beneath her was crumbling, and it wasn't just because of the badge. I pulled the radio from my pocket, I always carry it, a sheriff's habit, and pressed the button with a calm I didn't feel. "This is Walker. Send a car to the Northlake Hills Club. We have a detention." The radio's static answered, and the silence that followed was deafening. That's when Meredith's eyes started to tremble. The sound of the handcuffs snapping shut on Meredith Blake's wrists was sharp, almost musical, like a period at the end of a sentence that had gone on too long. The patrol car arrived in minutes, tires screeching in the club's parking lot, and two deputies I'd known for years, Ramirez and Ellis, stepped out with the efficiency of men who know the boss isn't messing around. Meredith struggled, her oversized hat falling to the grass, her crooked sunglasses revealing eyes spitting fury and fear. "This is outrageous," she screamed, her voice cracking as she tried to pull free. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." As if a neighborhood title was a shield against what she'd done. I stared at her, keeping the calm I'd learned from years as a sheriff, and recited her rights with the same clarity I'd used 1,000 times before. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you." Each word was a stone falling on the facade she'd built in Northlake Hills. The crowd watched, now silent, as if finally grasping the weight of what had happened. Some still held phones recording the downfall of the neighborhood queen, but others, like Mrs. Nguyen, lowered their heads, perhaps ashamed of staying quiet for so long. The man in the suit who'd whispered to her earlier vanished into the chaos, slipping through the crowd like smoke, and that stuck with me. Who was he, and why did Meredith obey him so quickly? But my focus wasn't her, the crowd, or the mystery lingering in the air. It was Noah. He was a few feet away, wrapped in a towel someone had brought, his wet hair plastered to his forehead, his body trembling not just from cold, but from a shock. That went beyond the water. Northlake Hills had never seen a fire like that, but it wasn't literal flames. It was the news of the assault on Noah spreading faster than the wind. Someone in the party crowd had posted the video, and within hours it was on every phone, every group chat, every corner of the internet Northlake Hills could reach. "HOA president pushes disabled child into pool," read the caption, raw and true. Comments exploded with angry emojis, broken hearts, and calls for justice. The Homeowners Association had no choice. Meredith Blake was suspended that same day, with an official statement as cold as she was, promising to investigate the incident. But no one was satisfied with half words. An emergency meeting was scheduled for the following night in the club's hall, and the entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. I wasn't going as Dean Walker, Noah's dad, or the new resident trying to keep his head down. This time, I went as the county sheriff. I put on the full uniform, crisp shirt, polished badge, boots gleaming, something I hadn't done since moving here, because I wanted everyone to see who I was. Noah stayed home with Mrs. Nguyen, who insisted on watching him with cookies and an animated movie, saying he needed a little magic. I kissed his forehead before leaving, promising I'd fix things. "You already did, Dad," he said, holding a drawing of a bird, and that smile of his almost made me stay. But I had to go. For him and for everyone Meredith had hurt. The club's meeting hall was packed, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and tension. Faces that once avoided me now stared, some with guilt, others with curiosity, a few with support. Mr. Carter sat in the front row, hands clasped like he was praying. Mrs. Nguyen, who'd returned after leaving Noah, sat with other mums whispering among themselves. There wasn't an empty chair, and the hum of conversation died when I walked in, my badge reflecting the ceiling lights. The board's table was empty, except for one man I vaguely recognized, the same guy in the expensive suit who'd whispered to Meredith at the party. He avoided my gaze, shuffling papers like they were more important than why we were there. Without a word, I plugged my flash drive into the hall's TV, a big screen that usually displayed pool rules or neighborhood ads. This time, it showed the truth. The video started and silence fell like a stone. The image of Meredith pushing Noah's chair, his scream, the fall into the water. It was all there, brutal and undeniable. Every second seemed to suck the air from the room. I saw moms cover their mouths, men clench their fists, and even the kid who served lemonade at the party wipe away a tear. When the video ended, with my voice in the background saying, "You've gone too far," the silence was so heavy, you could hear the tick of the clock on the wall. I stood from my chair, holding a stack of papers I'd spent the night reviewing at the station. "This," I said, pointing at the screen, "wasn't an accident, and it wasn't the first time." I tossed the complaints onto the table, one by one, like cards from a poisoned deck. A warning for inappropriate toys against the Lopez family, who have an autistic son. A fine for facade alterations against the Kims, who built a ramp for their daughter with paralysis. A notice for disruptive lifestyle against Mrs. Patel, who wears a veil and prays in her yard, and more, so much more. Each paper I named was a nail in the coffin of Meredith's reputation. She wasn't a manager, she was a tyrant. The club's hall felt like an impromptu courtroom, the weight of truth crushing any remnants of Northlake Hills' facade. When I finished presenting Meredith's complaints, a stack of papers telling stories of humiliation and control, the HOA board members couldn't hold my gaze. Mr. Reynolds, who always showed up to meetings with a forced smile, now rubbed his temples, his forehead slick with sweat. Mrs. Thompson, who signed off on Meredith's fines without question, bowed her head as if she wanted to disappear into her chair. The silence in the room broke with a trembling voice. Mrs. Patel, the same woman warned for praying in her yard. "She told me to rip out my flowers," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "Said azaleas weren't worthy of the neighborhood. They were my mother's." Her confession opened the floodgates. A young man, no older than 20, stood in the back, his voice shaking with anger. "My sister's autistic. Meredith called her noisy in front of everyone on the street. My sister stopped leaving the house for weeks." A mother spoke of fines for her visually impaired son's toys. Mr. Carter admitted Meredith threatened to report him for a neglected lawn while he was hospitalized. Each story was a brick falling from the empire of fear Meredith had built, and the room buzzed with a mix of outrage and relief, as if the neighborhood was finally breathing after years of suffocation. The vote came quickly, led by a neighbor I barely knew but whose eyes said she too had an untold story. All in favor of removing Meredith Blake from the Homeowners Association. Hands shot up, a forest of clenched fists and trembling fingers. None opposed. The decision was unanimous. Expelled. Meredith, who'd been standing at the side of the room handcuffed and under a deputy's watch, tried to stand, her face red with fury. "You can't do this. I made this neighborhood work. I'll sue every single one of you." But her voice, once a weapon, was now just noise. No one listened. The crowd cheered. Some shouted, "Out!" and she was escorted from the room, her suit wrinkled, her hair loose, smaller than ever, a shadow of what she once was. The courtroom, weeks later, was the final nail. The room was plain with white walls and a judge whose expression was tired but fair. I played the pool video again, now in high definition, with Noah's scream echoing through the speakers. I presented the complaints, the neighbors' testimonies, even text messages Meredith sent to the HOA board, full of cruel remarks about undesirable residents. She tried to defend herself, hiring a pricey lawyer who spoke of stress and good intentions, but the judge wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Blake," he said, removing his glasses, "you assaulted a vulnerable child, discriminated against entire families, and used your power to intimidate. The cost of that isn't just legal, it's the cost of the empathy you never had." The sentence came down clear. Guilty of assault, discrimination, and reckless conduct. Prison, hefty fines, and compensation that didn't erase the pain but helped rebuild. Part of the money went toward a new wheelchair for Noah, lightweight, motorized, with a blue seat he picked because it looks like the sky. The rest covered therapy sessions to help him process the fear that still crept into his nightmares. When I saw Meredith being led out of the courtroom handcuffed again, I didn't feel hate. I felt nothing but a quiet relief, like I could finally let go of a weight I'd carried since stepping foot in Northlake Hills. I came home that night and found Noah on the porch, drawing a bird with wings so big they seemed to hug the paper. He looked up, his eyes still wide, still full of a world that deserved to be better, and asked, "Can I smile again now, Dad?" My throat tightened, but I managed to answer, "You never should have stopped, champ." Northlake Hills was never the same after that day. And for the first time, that was a good thing. The white fences still gleamed under the sun, but the air felt lighter, like the neighborhood had learned to breathe again. People stopped walking with their heads down, afraid of a fine or a disapproving glance. Neighbors who once barely exchanged a hi now chatted in yards, swapped plant cuttings, held impromptu barbecues. Mrs. Nguyen brought a pot of azaleas to Mrs. Patel, who planted them with a smile I'd never seen before. Mr. Carter started teaching kids chess on his porch, and even the lemonade kid opened a juice cart at the club with a sign that read, "Free Smiles." It was like Northlake Hills had woken from a nightmare and decided to finally be a home. The new HOA leadership, elected in a meeting full of voices that refused to stay silent, threw out Meredith's rulebook like it was toxic waste. No more fines for colorful trash bins, ramps, or loud laughter. Instead, they formed a committee to support families with special needs, inspired by Noah. Their first act was painting our house's ramp in rainbow colors. Lily's idea, the girl from the yellow house, who said, "Noah deserves a path that shines." He laughed so hard when he saw the paint drying, pointing at each stripe with names he made up. "This red's for the cardinal, this blue's for the flying sky." Seeing my son like that, his face lit up, surrounded by kids running alongside. His chair, like it was part of the game, was more than justice. It was life. Noah went back to playing like never before. He led expeditions around the neighborhood with Timmy and Lily, hunting secret birds with my dad's old binoculars, or drew wheeled castles that now had towers for his friends. Sometimes I caught him staring at the sky, quiet, and I knew. The fear from the pool still lingered in his dreams, but with therapy and the love the neighborhood finally offered, he was finding his way back to the smile that never should have faded. Every laugh of his was a victory, a reminder that Meredith didn't win, and me? I kept being the county sheriff, answering calls, solving problems, keeping order. But above all, I was Noah's dad, the proudest dad in the world. I wore my badge with honor, but nothing shone brighter than watching my son race across the yard in his new chair, shouting that he was the flash of birds. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch with a beer, listening to the sound of kids playing, and think about how close I came to losing him to a place that thought it could erase who he was. Northlake Hills changed, but Noah, he was always perfect.